Okay. Notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the agenda on the bulletin board at the municipal complex, filing a copy of the agenda in the office of the township clerk at the municipal complex, forwarding a copy of the agenda to the Burlington County Times and the Courier Post, forwarding written notice to each person who has requested copies of the regular meeting schedule, and all the above posting, filing, and mailing have taken place on the 19th day of September 2014. We are going to move into our informal workshop. So, Scott, would you like to?
Sure, Stacy. There's a couple things on the agenda for this evening. Thank you. I'm going to go straight to number 2. We can discuss number 1 after we get done with this, because we have guests in attendance to present to council. First thing I want to discuss is Strawbridge Lake. As council, and I believe members of the public are fully aware, we have 2 ongoing projects right now to help improve Strawbridge Lake. The first being the improvement, or I'd say the repair, reconstruction of the dams, which is ongoing. The second is the evaluation of the water quality by Princeton Hydro to discover what issues we have there. Chet Dawson, our chairman from the Morristown Environmental Advisory Committee, is in attendance here. He's provided me with an update in the last couple of weeks, and I've asked him to come tonight to share the same update with council and the public. That discussion, I guess, turned into another discussion. We had a subsequent meeting since the last town council meeting. This one also included Wolf Skakel, who is not only with the Environmental Advisory Committee, but he's also with Sustainable Morristown. And Wolf and Chet, myself, Teresa Miller, and Scott Taylor met to discuss possible future improvements to the park beyond the dams and beyond the water quality. We're talking more about the park itself and potential improvements, potential funding sources. We all believe that there's potential grants available, and Wolf's going to speak to that and discuss how that came about, and because it's really the genesis of the idea came from him. But first I'd like to call Chet up to give an update on the evaluation of the lake by Princeton Hydro.
This is informal, so I guess I don't too much. Yeah, good evening. So far, we've completed the first 2 rounds of testing, and the last round of testing is Wednesday. Once we have that in, and all the results in, I'll give you a more formal update. And the plan also is, once we have all the testing together, is for us to get together with Princeton Hydro, start to put together a long-range management plan, which then we present to you for your thoughts. We're not quite ready to do that. What I want to do this evening a little bit is just tell you what we've found so far. I have sent some information to Phil and Greg, because they've both been active as part of, we've had meetings and stuff, they've attended some of the other meetings, so I have sent them some of this information already. What we've done is we're really doing a lot of testing. Like we're doing basically physical, chemical, and biological testing. So far, mostly it's the chemical testing that we've got in so far, and biological as far as weeds and algae and things like that. I think the things we're finding are, is we kind of knew some of it before, is the lake still is challenged with too much phosphorus. Normally you want, if you're over 0.02 phosphorus, anything above that, you're going to see weed growth, you're going to see algae growth. You know, we're at 2 to 3 times that. So it's really, it's too high. It's a lot lower than it was 10 years ago, which is good, but it's there, and it varies a little bit during the year because a lot of it settles down the bottom, and as the water temperature changes and the oxygen levels change, it releases itself from the soil and goes back into the soil again. So it's kind of a little bit of fluctuation to it, but it's too high. So that's one problem. That's leading to some issues we have. It helps the weeds grow, which you're seeing. You're seeing the spatter dock is the type of weed that we see throughout the lake. Spatter dock can grow down about 6 feet in water. So it doesn't mean the water is necessarily shallow. It has a very heavy, thick root structure. It can grow quite deep, and it spreads. The roots get down, you may put this big, heavy root kind of spreads around, and things just pop up everywhere from it. So we have a lot of that. We thought this year that the spatter dock, we thought about spraying it and killing some off and digging it out. We're going to present that to you. But a disease hit it early in the year. And we're kind of hoping that disease would kill quite a bit off. It did initially. We saw it dying off. But then it seems to be recovering. So, and I guess we should have expected that, but it seems to be recovering. So, right now it's too late to do any treatment, but next year I'm sure we're going to have some sort of plan for treatment. The other issue is we're seeing what we call fungomelalgy algae, which is that ugly algae you see sometimes floating in the water. We're seeing that along the shoreline in a lot of places. It'll go away once the water gets colder, but we're seeing it this summer. I showed it to Phil and to Greg when we were one of our meetings down there. We're seeing that near the shoreline. It's pretty ugly looking. Nobody wants to look at it. It's easily treatable with chemicals, but again, we didn't do that this year because it didn't show up until later in the year. Next year, we're probably going to have to, maybe address that too. It's is treatable, but again, it happens partly because of a lot of phosphorus in the water, and it helps to promote it. So that's an issue. One thing that's positive about it, we were worried about the fish population. The fish population looks pretty good, actually. We talked before, I think, that the oxygen level in the lake below about 4 to 5 feet, there's pretty much no oxygen, not very much. Not enough for most fish to survive. So except for your bobber feeders, except for carp and catfish, the fish in the lake are mainly swimming around near the surface. Now once the winter comes in, that oxygen level probably goes down deeper, they'll be able to go deeper in the lake, but right now they're mainly around the shoreline and at the surface. They're not going to deep waters with not enough oxygen for them. What is in the deep water are carp and catfish. Neither one is really very desirable in our lake. We have a mud bottom lake and they tend to stir it up. If you think about it, I don't know if you've ever been in a lake and you walk into a muddy lake, what happens? All that mud starts, everything around you looks full of silt, all the water is muddy. Well, for me, these fish are doing that constantly. They're swimming around the bottom of the lake, stirring up the bottom constantly. We're not sure how much that's impacting it. Normally, we take a measurement called suspended solids. Normally, those suspended solids should be very high. If we got, because of that cloudiness of the water, we expect it to be very high. It's moderately high, but nowhere near as high as we thought. I've discussed this with Princeton Hydro because it doesn't support the argument as well as we thought it would, that the fish are causing a lot of that problem. But they said that their technique doesn't pick up really fine particles. So we've asked in this last test round to look at really finer particles. They suspended. The other thing we've done, though, is we're doing Elizabeth Enders and her team have done a perimeter watershed study. One they found out, at least one of the streams coming into the lake, Pennsauken Creek, is also pretty turbid. It has a lot of discoloration color to it, too. So at least for the lower part of the lake, that doesn't impact the two upper parts. That does impact the lower part of the lake. That is also influencing that turbidity, that discoloration. That turbidity itself is a problem. Our lake's not unusual as far as lakes in southern New Jersey. As far as shallow, muddy bottom lakes, we're pretty typical. So we shouldn't say our lake is worse than others. It's pretty typical, probably better than a lot. But that doesn't mean we're happy about it. So what we're seeing is the turbidity of the lake. We can only see light's only penetrating a couple feet in the lake, which really isn't enough. And that's why the oxygen level is so low down the bottom, because there's no light getting down there. That is some goodness, because in the deep part of the lakes, weeds can't grow either. There's no light getting down there either, but they grow on the shallower parts pretty readily. So that's the good parts about it, but still you like maybe a little more. So that high turbidity, that darkness, the cloudiness in the lake, preventing the light getting down. So that's another issue. And that's caused by, primarily in our lake, probably by fine particles, really fine, and also maybe by some fine algae in the water too. Maybe some natural discoloration in the water too, we're not sure. But I've asked Princeton Hydro again to get a better feeling for what's causing that, because the first testing didn't really clearly tell us. It didn't say this. We do this chlorophyll A test, which indicates how much fine algae you have in the water. It didn't show real high. It showed moderately high, but not super high as we expected. So both of those show we got suspended solids, we have the algae in it, but we didn't get it so as much as we wanted, so we're trying to test a little better to get a better feeling for that. So those are kind of two issues. Most of the other things, I'll get into the depth, the silt stuff in a minute, because that's probably the big one thing we're concerned about. Most of the other things in the lake aren't too bad. So the biggest, the phosphorus level is way too high, the weed growth is too high, turbidity is too high. There are ways you can deal with that. And we'll investigate it with our, looking at management in the future. A lot of those are, with weeds, you have two options. You can either chemically treat them, or you can go in and rake them out. Neither one's permanent. So a long-range lake plan is going to say every 1-2 years, you have to repeat these things. Now, they're not real super expensive to do, but lots of budget to when the lake's going to look good. It's going to have constantly yearly care. Well, you're not going to just do it and it's going to go away. Any of these things. The turbidity and the phosphorus, again, you can chemically treat those. There are a couple of chemicals called alum's one and those called Phoslock, which you can put in the lake and they lock up the phosphorus. Now, again, we're not sure how much phosphorus is still coming into the lake. We know there's a lot of phosphorus in the bottom, in the muddy bottom. We know there's phosphorus in there generally. It's not flushing out. So we don't know how much phosphorus is coming in. So again, we want to look at Hooper Creek, which comes in from, and that comes in out from, where Wegmans is, that's extension ponds, where all the geese are out there. That flows into the lake. Also, Pensacola Creek brings it in. It comes off the road. So phosphorus, it's not allowed now in lawn fertilizers, but it's still allowed in commercial companies can still use it. It's found in ice treatment for icing emissions. It's found in road treatments. Geese droppings, probably a big cause that we have. And we look out how much geese droppings in Strawberry Lake plus what's coming down Hooper Creek from upstream where we have hundreds of geese upstream nesting, resting there at night in those waters. We need to look at that again, see how much is coming in, and whether it's something we can practically deal with. I mean, one thing is talk to the people out by Wegmans and say, get those damn geese out of your pond out there. Would probably help us. But so that's kind of where we are with that. The other big one is, which I think everybody really talks about, is we need a dredging. Right now, what we've seen so far, it looks like no. But again, we're missing information. The data we have so far, look, we have the amount of water that was calculated to be in the lakes after the last dredging for the upper two, and then an estimated amount for the lower lake. So we have the amount of water that's calculated now. And actually, the water that's calculated now is actually greater than was calculated back then. Now, the difference may simply be the methods used to calculate it. But it's pretty positive, the fact that the amount of water in the lakes, which affects the depth of the lake, because the surface elevation is exactly the same, determined by the dams. It hasn't changed over the years. It's exactly the same. So if you get more water, it's because it's been dredged out and it's deeper. So that's a positive thing. The other thing that's really positive, I have what they call a bathymetric reading, which is the depth reading of both the silt and the water depth for the lower lake and the middle lake. I'm missing it for the upper lake. This is before the dredging. If I look at the ones before the dredging, if I take a cross-section, and I take that same cross-section today, if I take that cross-section and I take the depth of the water, plus the depth of the sediment that was going to be removed, I pretty much come up with a profile of what the lake looks like today, which is really a positive thing. I didn't bring pictures with me. I got pictures of what the lake looked like before the dredge. Then we forget how awful it was. It was only 2 feet deep back then, 2 or 3 feet deep. Even the deepest parts, things were growing everywhere. The sides of the lake were all caving in everywhere. I'll bring those pictures next time I present it. I mean, the work that was done by volunteers and by Brent Druckers and others last year to stabilize the lake, were really pretty successful. All those logs and stuff we put along the lake, the banks are holding up pretty well. Everything, maybe some issues, but overall, it's so much better than it was. So that's pretty positive. We still have the streams coming in; those streams are still bringing crap in. I mean, like Pensacola Creek used to have chemical companies up that stream. They're gone. So we're not having those chemicals being poured into the lake and coming in the lake. We had fish kills back in the 80s. And by the way, those carp we have in the lake, we'd be storing it up, they were actually stocked in the lake in the 70s. So the state today won't allow you to stock the carp. And actually, if you have them, you do like we were going to lower the lake deeper for our dam work, where we had remove fish and protect them. Any carp removed, we couldn't put them back in again. They don't want carp in lakes.
They go back in your pond, or?
No, they actually have a processing plant where they process the food, feed, or something like that in North Jersey. It's up there. But it's really the whole idea to get out of there. Scott and I we talked around and said, well, here we gotta do is have a fishing derby to get sent out of there. I don't know how much, we got a lot to get out, but I mean, any amount's gonna help. So maybe it's not a bad idea.
What's the bait for the carp?
Cheap, well, anything that sits at the bottom. Things are smell, just sit at the bottom. Like you used to go crab fishing, you know, your dead things at the bottom, sit in the car. So that's what I've done is, in order to really absolutely verify that we don't have a infiltration of more silt, I really need the data after the dredging. And I don't have any data for the upper lake before the dredging either. I can't find it, it's missing. Scott's staff there and Patricia Hunt have been tremendously helpful to me trying to find stuff. I've been back there with Patty, looking through the archives back in those rooms back there. We're pulling out boxes and looking at them. And, you know, Scott's secretary, and we just haven't been able to find that data. We found other stuff, I just can't find anything. It looks like it was thrown out by the previous township manager. But it should be, a lot was done, not by Pinoni Associates. The data I do have is from Pinoni, and the reference I have is all of Pinoni. So I've contacted Pinoni Associates, and I've asked them if they got the data. It's archived, so they have to dig it out. I've asked them if Scott and Tom Rochelle have agreed to, Tom Ford, have agreed to let me go get it. Pinoni Associates hasn't gotten back to me yet. But I'll stay on it. They should have it. They must have it. So,
and just to count those, there may be a slight charge since it is archived.
yeah.
But yeah, this is
It's,
information we need.
and it's fairly modest, yeah.
Hugh Doherty was our representative at that time.
And that's what I've contacted, but I haven't, you know, he responded to me before, he hasn't responded to my latest request. They're probably not too happy about both back there archives, or in Camden someplace. I'm missing that, and if I had that, really, that's gonna give us exactly what the bottom looked like after the dredging, because that's really gonna be the definitive thing. It tells us what it looks like then, what it looks like now. The one thing I have now that's kind of bothersome is they measured the silt back then, the amount of silt that's down below the water. Back then they used a stick. You put a stick down the lake and measured, you know, where the dirt came up onto, where the water was, and you reported that. Today they use electronic devices, they use sonar to determine both. So it's a whole different technique. Problem I'm running through right now is back then we had like 3 feet deep of silt that we end up removing. Now I'm looking at ones where that 3 foot of silt seems to be gone and it stays gone. And now they're showing like 6 or 7 feet of silt below that. I don't understand, you know, we don't understand what's going on, the differences. There's got to be a reason. It's got to be something different, but I need an explanation for that, and I've asked for an explanation too. I don't have that yet. So, just to finalize it before I introduce Wolf, you know, we've got quite a bit of good data. I need that data from Pinoni Associates. Once we have it, I don't have the biological data yet. I don't have the data on how much fine algae we have in the lake and how much zooplankton, which are the stuff that fish feed on. I need that, but I don't have that yet. But I have everything else. And the last testing is this week. So in a few weeks, we should have all the data in. At that point, I plan to drive up to Princeton Hydro and sit down with them and go through the data. Then they'll probably meet with our committee and start putting together a management plan which we can present to you at that time. Okay.
Chet, I was wondering, a lot of people talk to me about not being able to see the lake from Route 38, which we were able to at one time, and as far as that goes, from the drive around the lake, because of the vegetation that's around it growing up, particularly the upper lake. Is that something that STEM and or other folks think is correct, that or should be cut down? Or?
Well, I think what our feeling is right now is we don't want to remove it,
right.
But it could be trimmed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it serves 2 huge purposes. One is it keeps still other things from flowing into the lake, because it acts as a trap, a barrier, and a lot of stuff. It hits it and it sort of sits there, stuff coming in. So it's pretty important to have it. Also, we still have geese, but it does help a little bit with the geese.
Is there a recommendation for trimming coming from Princeton Hydro?
We will look at that. We haven't done it yet. Okay. That's on our agenda, but we think we can trim it. But then you have to try to trim it, right? So
well, there's that.
Otherwise, it's just grow. You know, it's nice to do it. But it can be trimmed down. But we don't want to remove it, but it can be trimmed back. And I think with what Wolf's going to talk about We've been talking about our committee meetings, and we presented to Scott and his team last week. The lake can offer an awful lot to the township. We're only taking partial advantage of that. So we think there's some things you can do to make it much more valuable to the town than it is. And we have ideas, we're looking for other people's ideas. So I'm going to let, any other questions? First of all, any other questions for me?
I just want to follow up with what Mr. Newcomer just brought up the first time I heard of that. It would seem to me, just to take the other side of it, if you can't see the lake from Route 38, logic says you can't see Route 38 from the lake. And I would imagine that's probably...
Well, Scott, in the 28 years that I've I've lived in the town, that's one of the things that people see as a jewel from Route 38, the beauty of the lake. And seeing it is a value, I think, for us. That's why I brought it up. And people tell me that, not just me.
That's encouraging just to hear that the lake is not as bad as, we have been hearing.
I don't think so. And we definitely have a weed problem. If we don't do something about it, they're going to keep spreading.
Well,
Right.
and I've always maintained that we have to maintain our assets, and Strawbridge Lake is an asset to Morristown. We need to make sure we maintain it, not only now, but like you said, have a management.
We have a management plan. We're probably going to want to have a lake manager, make sure we do that management plan too. So, we're going to have to look at budgeting for that for next year. So
Very appreciative, though, of all the volunteers that are doing, this, because why Morristown's such a great town. We've got volunteers who step up, people who, like yourself, have the expertise in this, and then can come to council and let us know your findings. And
well, I'm enjoying this.
Well, I'm glad,
Yeah.
I'm glad. But
You do a great job.
We appreciate everything that you do, so thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to echo what Stacy has said. The job that the advisory committees do to give us whole information and good information, regardless of what that might be, good or bad, for us to make a good decision is invaluable. So I want to thank you very much for the thorough job you're doing, and it's enlightening.
We're glad you like it.
Yeah, really.
I'm hoping I have to go back to you and say I was all wrong about the
Well, we
self.
hope
Yeah, we're going to do that. I'm hoping I have to go back and say, oh, I was wrong. Okay.
I doubt that will happen.
So Wolf is on. Wolf has been really interested in this and what we can do for the lake. And we're just going to give you some concept ideas and say not exactly what we suggest. We're looking for suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for hearing me tonight. I wanted to take this opportunity to at least maybe seek your support to step back and look at the park as a real park. To me, this park has existed as it has in its current status since 1931 when the park was first created. We've added very little in the way of amenities. There's been very little that's been done to upgrade it. There's been a couple of things. Imagine the playground equipment that was put in, we probably put it in the 60s based on the stock. And you certainly have some handicap parking. But there are other things that are going on with the park. It's a real, not only an environmental jewel for the community, but it's also an economic engine for the community. There are a lot of people that come to the park and then come downtown and frequent the restaurants and stores that exist. So I think it's in Morristown's best interest, if it wants to be sustainable, to also invest some time and energy into looking at bringing this Strawbridge Lake into the 21st century. I don't have any preconceived ideas. There are some things I think that should be considered. For example, handicap accessibility. There's not a real trail system there that somebody with disabilities is going to be able to easily navigate. If they do, they're going to have to stay on the roadway. Cars drive on the roadway. Careful as people are when they're driving, they're not always paying attention, especially if they're looking at the view of the lake rather than the road ahead of them. So I think having at least some consideration for handicap accessibility, handicap trails, perhaps a handicap fishing dock, something that makes it so it's easier for folks to get to the water. These are all ideas that I have, but they're not necessarily reflective of what the community may have. So what I would propose is that the community support bringing in somebody to take a look at the park, and let's bring it up to the 21st century. Let's see what the people in the community would like to see in in the park. And no pending for actually building a dock or building trails or signage or anything else, but let's at least start the public discussion on what should be done with the park. How would we like it to look for the 21st century? So that's my proposal tonight. Hopefully you will support that.
Yeah, Council, we really had a good meeting last week with Walt and Chet, and as I said earlier, with Teresa Miller and Scott Taylor were there as well. Unfortunately, Scott was scheduled to be here tonight, but something came up at the last minute and he wasn't able to attend. But what Scott and I have been talking about since this meeting, and we've kind of touched upon it at the meeting as well, is how to approach this from a community standpoint, because you know, the lake is such a fabulous asset. It's one of the few assets in town that has a lot of different interest groups, I'll call them, involved. So the rough outline of what Scott and I have discussed, if council wants to move forward with this, he did send me today a draft proposal which has the scope of work and a few other things, doesn't have a price yet, so we're still narrowing down the scope of work before it's presented to council. But one of the things we've talked about was sort of a multi-step process. Council wants to go forward with this. The first step would be Scott working with Teresa and I in order to just gather information. Scott would map out the park, walk the park with us, you know, just really see what's there. Second step, but then bring in what I'll call certain stakeholders in town. And we've got, and Phil just mentioned, you know, these wonderful advisory committees. And this is actually a facility that has a lot of different advisory committees that would have really good input. And Sustainable Moorestown and the Environmental Committee, which Wolf's on both, are obviously two. Recreation Advisory Committee is a no-brainer. Open Space Committee, another no-brainer. And even the Appearance Committee, because while we want to make this as functional as possible, we also want to improve the aesthetics where they need it to be improved. So we get to a point where we have a small committee made up of people from those groups, develop a concept, and then Scott would actually, with that group, host, you know, basically bring it to the public and get public feedback. You know, open to the public meetings, probably in this room, allow people to come in and give their feedback. There is going to be probably tons of ideas of what we should and should not have. Wolf mentioned a dock for disabled people to fish off of. We talked about boat ramps, which we don't have. We've talked about paths and signage, and you know, just in our meeting with 5 of us, you know, we bounced off 50 ideas in 5 minutes. So it's probably not going to be a quick process to get a final plan to council, but you know, we do see this as sort of the final piece of the puzzle. Fix the dams, fix the water quality itself, and then, as Wolf said, make the park the jewel that it can be. So that's sort of the idea as it stands right now.
I used to speak for Scott. He was the one that designed Boundary Park. I'm familiar with it. We did a great job with that. So an opportunity to do something similar here.
I like what you said about it being all the things it could be. I was a member of a great bunch of volunteers who did Family Fun Day and Strawberry Lake Festival. I think they brought a lot of people into the community. Also, you know, the Middle Lake Dam would probably be an easy way to go to a handicap access. Actually, I fished there this year.
Are you saying that you? All right, well, thank you very much. Again, I want to thank you for all of your work and dedication to this, because without volunteers like yourself, you know, you wouldn't have all this information, this great information to be able to act upon. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wolf.
All right, so we are moving into 7:30, and I only have one more.
Yeah, there's just, I have one other quick thing for the workshop. And even though we've just gone past 7:30, I don't think it'll take more than a minute or two. I did receive a recommendation from Teresa, the Recreation Advisory Committee, has presented a recommendation to council to name the tennis courts at Maple Dawson Park in memory of David Gentili. Along with that, we would put a plaque somewhere near the corner of Maple and Dawson with a brief biography of David. And Greg, if you want to, if the RAF liaison, if you want to add anything to that.
Just that the council had asked that this be reviewed by the Recreation Advisory Committee, and it was discussed and reviewed. I actually had a letter from one of the proponents of it, Sandy McGuire, which also, without wasting council's time, is all things we've already discussed. I would ask the council give its approval for David Gentili to do this. For those of you who don't know, David Gentili is somebody who rose above his handicaps after being injured on the Morristown High School football field, and became somebody who was giving to the town. Yet he served on the board of the Y. He served on the Recreation Advisory Committee. He gave back to the town. After he passed, over $500,000 was raised for his memorial. The skate park was made a portion of that memorial. We don't have a skate park now, so it's a good thing. I think we would go forward and say this is something to remember David Gentili, a really wonderful person.
Did we contact the family and find out if this was okay with them?
Sandy McGuire did, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, Sandy's been fantastic working as sort of the liaison, because Kelly does not live in town anymore.
Right, and I know she mentioned she's come several times, and this was kind of her banner she was flying, so I have no problem. I think it's a wonderful idea, and to keep his memory going, if we had to take that skate park down because of,
I love it.
yeah, insurance and danger, problems with it. So I have no problem with it. I don't know.
No, I think it's great. We didn't have to, I think it's the right thing to do to get, close the skate park, but it's also the right thing to do to continue to honor a great member of our community. So, I'm looking forward to it.
We got our,
Yep.
got our blessing moving forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we are going to now move into our official action meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to continue this?
I think probably,
Just, we'll continue this after.
no,
Well, if everybody's okay on council,
maybe
move
just
forward with
limit
it?
it to just a few, and then we can come back to it later.
You got it. All right, so then we are going to move to our residents' requests and presentations for items that are not listed on the agenda. You come and just state your name.
Yep.
And address.
Thank you for your time, Your Honor, Council. My name is Mike Radecki. I reside at 265 North Riding Drive with my 2 young children and my wife. I am a professional in the utility business, and my wife is a water engineer, and she's also currently fighting cancer. I'm here tonight with a few other concerned residents about our drinking water. The township issued the 2013 Consumer Confidence Report earlier in this year in the first quarter to every consumer or customer, informing us about the quality of our drinking water. In that report, we learned about a year ago the township was aware of a pollutant in our water called 1,2,3-trichloropropane, or 1,2,3-TCP for short. The report stated that the EPA risk-based screening level for TCP is 0.65 parts per trillion, and the amount detected in the Morristown water system is 38 parts per trillion, which is almost 60 times higher. The Environmental Protection Agency performed a study in 2009 that concluded TCP is likely to be a carcinogenic to humans. The American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists also classified TCP in 2009 as a Group A3 carcinogen. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services study in 2011 summarized TCP is reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. In 2013, the state of California officially recognized TCP as a human carcinogen. Our township has multiple multiple sources, including groundwater, surface water, and an interconnect with New Jersey American Water. It's extremely unlikely that every one of these sources is contaminated with 123 TCP. So there is a non-contaminated source. My request is simple: immediate and discontinued use of the water sources that are contaminated with 123 TCP. This request is immediately achievable and warrants a more proactive approach than we're looking into this, or the township is meeting with regulatory agencies and we're just waiting on the results of one more step. The continued presence of this known carcinogen in our drinking water is unacceptable, and I really hope to come to our next township meeting for the township to tell us that we're no longer drawing from a water source contaminated with 123 TCP. In closing, I note from the water that you're all drinking right in front of you today, how much 123 TCP is in that water. But more importantly, how much will you drink in the meeting tonight when you go home with your family and your children and drink that same water?
Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Can you have Bill Butler make sure he comes to the next meeting to give us his take on what's going on? I know we have the new filtration system that we put in. Is that correct?
And that is correct. And if, I don't have a card on me, but I would like, perhaps if we take a break sometime during the meeting, if you're not planning on leaving right away, to give you my email address, because you could send me.
Website, right? On the website?
It is.
Okay, I can get off the website.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Just send me some of that data that you just.
It's all in the report you all published to us.
You specified a non-contaminated source and other sources, and you differentiated on that. Are you familiar with the source yourself?
I'm familiar with what's in your report.
Okay.
And it states that there are groundwater, surface water, and New Jersey Water American. That's what is on the report.
Right.
I'm assuming that some are contaminated and some I would have to hope.
Right.
And how much is coming from which, I don't know. And why it's in the report that we're consuming 38 parts per billion is puzzling to me. That's the report. That's what's being published. So we're all getting that from whatever source is being used. Where the sources are and what is being to every resident, I don't know.
Thank you
I
very
know where I
much.
am. I'm up in the upper end of town.
Just very briefly,
Close.
I did speak to Bill Butler about this. DEP at the state level, as I understand it, the bill is offering municipalities funding to help treat for that contaminant. So he just heard about it in late August,
Excellent.
and he's looking into it.
Okay.
So we're going to get, if we can, and if it's in fact the case that the state is offering 100% capital funding to help municipalities treat for this, we'll treat for it.
Outstanding.
As I understand it from Bill, this is something that has not been regulated in the past. It's something that EPA more recently has requested municipalities to test for, and have a testing for. And on top of it, you know, it's something that the state is hopefully going to deal with too, in addition to requiring us to test for. So that's what's going on.
Great.
But we will follow up with Bill. I imagine we'll have an update on the status of that program.
2 weeks. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Next meeting, 2 weeks. Good. Thank you for your
We'll
time.
make sure Bill's here for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more requests?
Hi. Mary Ann Catone, 11 Greendale Road. First, I want to thank council for all your hard work. And I know that your ideal is to provide for the common good. And you get little recognition, so thank you. And all you get is complaints. So I want to say thank you. I also want to say thank you to Open Door for videotaping, and also to all the committees, just as you said. They are wonderful. And the last thing that I viewed on through Open Door was the last council meeting. And one of the things that came up was from the Economic Development Committee. And I want to thank them because that was an incredible report that they gave. And obviously their time and talent was used in that, about proposing for upgrading the meter system in Morristown, which is really needed, as well as the parking lot, which thank you for doing that. And I especially noted the desire to proceed, but to include the local businesses in your decision-making. And what color, what design, I'm sure you'll make the right decision. I'm not worried about that. There is one thing that I do have a concern about, and that is metering the municipal parking lot. I know that that was mentioned briefly, but and there was many ideas about maybe having some available for businesses, etc. I just would caution town council to be not to be penny wise and pound foolish, and really to consider the economic liability of our business people, as well as other people who use the parking lot, such as the churches who park there during the week and other times when they're using facilities. I know that you will do the best you can, and I know you will consider all citizens, and that you will make the best decision based on what we truly need as citizens in Morristown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to let everyone know, I know EDAC made the presentation. I unfortunately was not here at the meeting, but I was part of the presentation, putting it together at EDAC. They did a great job, amazing job. We have not made a decision as a council. We still have more things to look into. But just wanted to reassure people that this is something that we have talked to the business people about. I have gone and talked to businesses, and a lot of the businesses want to see the meters up on Main Street continue, because it turns over the customers. And there's been some complaints lately with some of the broken meters up there that we have, that employees are parking there all day long and not letting customers come in to use the businesses. But that being said, I think that's one of our main objectives here, is to take care of that, because we want our businesses to thrive. And my personal opinion is, back in the municipal lot, there's no meters back there now. I'm not sure that that's something that we have to look at right now. You know, if down the road that's something other council wants to look at, that's, you know, their prerogative. But right now, I think it needs to be cleaned up. It needs to be fixed. And I believe Scott Taylor's design calls for 42 more spaces, which I think, if anybody complains about not being able to find spaces, another 42 spaces is going to be something that will make any business thrive. So I know we haven't made a decision, but that's kind of what I've been leaning for and leaning to, and what business people have been talking about to me. So I don't know if anybody else had any.
Yeah, I mean, the presentation by Chairman Gallo at the last meeting, what we discussed was that he asked council to, I guess, move the ball forward from where they left off. We're going to look at this internally with staff and professionals and build upon the research that they did and bring something to council, and probably bring multiple options to council in terms of how we go forward. I think most people would agree that something needs to be done, at least on the Main Street parking meters. But as you said, the immediate need for the municipal parking lot across the street is to fix it up. And if we do anything with meters, that'll be a decision to be made down the road.
I believe the recommendation for EDAC was to look at a graduated value in time closer to the businesses and further away from the businesses. So you would have more time the further away you park, which is typical convenience logic. But that was only a recommendation. So we could see whatever those options bring to us. But there was also a benefit brought out by any of the meters that we would be advertising possibly for the businesses in the meters, as well as them being solar.
Being mindful of our need to move into official action, I think it's our job with anything that we do regarding parking on Main Street to benefit our businesses and to be economic stewards. And we don't want to do anything that's going to discourage people from coming to Morristown and parking and staying a while and frequenting as many businesses as possible. Having those meters is not about raising money, it's about that turnover that keeps more new people coming in over the hours to frequent the businesses. But, we don't necessarily need to worry about that turnover in the lot, especially if we're going to be increasing the capacity by 25%. So I think definitely we need to move forward with the meters, but we probably don't need to meter the parking lot.
Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Back.
He's back.
Jet Dawson, 909 Heritage Road. I really want to bring it up, I did dinner tonight with Barbara Rich, and I think Barbara Rich is a friend of this, she's been here forever, she attends all these meetings. I think most of you are aware she was in a very serious car accident back in June. She just recently got out of Pier 1, she's back home. But I'll really let you know, she'll be going to Florida in 2 weeks for an extended stay with her family, her daughter down there. Her return is really uncertain. Barbara would like to come back, but whether she can or not, what her family wants, I think her daughter would like her to stay down there with her. So really, her return right now is uncertain. So I think that, I almost recommend that the town council recognize her in some way.
Absolutely.
But she is going in 2 weeks, so it's pretty soon.
Thank you very much for that.
I've been going to meetings with Barbara for 25 years.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Amazing woman.
Amazing.
Definitely what embodies more skill.
Paul Conlon, 443 North Church.
Sorry.
443 North Church, Paul Conlon. You're getting old when single stream recycling is really, like, you're really excited about it. That's like, so I just wanted to.
Be old too.
Thanks to the county for what they've done. It's really a great thing. We really appreciate it. We talked a couple weeks ago about the club contributions to the parks, and Mr. Carew has been really good about being in contact with Mr. Newcomer too. And I just wondered, Mr. Carew, if maybe you could review where we're at on that.
Yeah, and I apologize, I was out today, I was going to respond to your last email, just to let you know your idea is something we certainly can look into. And either way, we're looking at moving forward quickly, but what I share with Mr. Conlow, because I was not at the meeting you brought this up, that I can share with everybody else right now is we are in the process of designing additional improvements to Wesley Bishop Park, and we're doing that in conjunction with the lacrosse group and the softball group. We have verbal agreements from softball and football to contribute to the most recent, the new turf field, at $10,000 and $10,000. There's
I'm sorry, did you say football and
lacrosse for the new turf. Softball's the project we're designing now. Okay, I'm sorry. Football, the new field is obviously football and lacrosse. We're still developing the sponsorship program. The next step in that will be, I'll call it the most lucrative because it's the field naming rights. There's a little bit more legislative finessing that we have to do to make sure that that's done right, because I don't know that any municipality in the state that does this. There are public entities like Rutgers that do it, but in terms of municipal governments, I'm not aware of any. That will certainly help, and that will be something that we'll be doing in partnership with all the different sports organizations. They will be able to benefit the organizations themselves, no one personally, but any funding that's brought to us through the sponsorship program from a specific organization, and you can have a child in multiple organizations and actually have it split between those multiple organizations. We'll get 50% of the proceeds minus our costs. We look at that as a potential for a huge revenue source. The banner program began last year, did well. That will continue to improve. But we're also, and we've discussed this through the capital budget process this year, the new improvements that are on the table now for council for the softball and lacrosse we're working with them because they're essentially going to pay for those improvements. There is some infrastructure work that the township would cover, but for what they would use for their organizations, they would cover the cost. And since lacrosse was both involved in this and in the new field, The thought was just to tie it all in one nice clean bow at the end of this process, which will only be a couple more weeks, and have a single agreement with them. What Mr. Conlo suggested, council, to me through email, getting the written agreement down with the cross and football on the new turf field now. And I guess my thoughts towards that are twofold. One, as I said earlier, I don't think we're that far away from getting to the end of this process. And two, I don't, lacrosse has repeatedly committed both publicly and privately that, you know, they're going to pay this money. It's not a private sector thing where you're afraid a customer is going to run out before paying their bill. They have 500 Morristown children in their program. We always retain the right to close the field if need be, and I can't imagine we'd ever get to that. But I think within probably by the end of October, Mr. Taylor will have a conceptual design and cost, full cost figured out, passed on to the engineer so he can put their costs together in order for us to go out and bid. And at that point, we would, like I said, tie up everything in a nice clean bow and have the different agreements signed upon with the different organizations. So that's sort of the conversation Mr. Conlo and I have had going back and forth.
So soccer is not, I mean, soccer isn't.
Well, and it's something that has been discussed internally. It's not to bore everybody with the minutiae of some of the things that have gone on behind the scenes.
No, please.
But sure, back before I began my tenure as a township manager, when the Kids Project was developed, those that had put it together made a concerted effort to get all the different sports organizations involved in support of that project. That had its certain benefits, but it also caused some difficulty because that group was not speaking directly on behalf of the township. And the township should have been at the time working directly with the sports organizations, and they weren't. There was this middleman. During that process, soccer was, I'll say, back and forth on their support of the Kids Initiative. And the Kids Initiative, just to remind everybody, was not only the new turf field at Wesleyan Bishop North, but redoing the field that's used by softball and flag football at Wesleyan Bishop South. That would have been natural grass, and baseball improvements at Prior Park. And when push came to shove right before the council at the time, and this is when I was here, made the decision to fund at least the first and third projects I just mentioned. Soccer said that they were not interested in being a partner, that they would not contribute to any debt service. The project was then finalized in terms of design and planning, and then constructed. It was done so without soccer lines on the field. As soccer said, they didn't need the field. During the course of the construction of that field, there was a huge changeover in the Morristown Soccer Club board, almost 100% change. The new board does have interest in using the field. The reason we haven't gone forward with anything on that is really twofold. One, because we want to have the agreements with lacrosse and football in writing, even though we have the verbal agreements, and we have written commitments, but not the agreement between the township and them. The second problem is, right now there are football lines on that field, there are lacrosse lines on that field, there are field hockey lines on that field. There's also 2 yellow rectangles that are used by our own rec departments, soccer and field hockey, and also lacrosse for small-sided fields. And for anybody that has played on those fields knows that it gets very busy. So we did not put soccer lines on the field. Their offer now is to contribute in exchange for having lines put on the field, but more importantly, having dedicated time. As I said earlier, there's roughly 500 Morristown children in lacrosse. Spring would be very difficult for them, and even in the fall with football, although the numbers aren't there, the space needs are greater. And since those clubs have made the commitment, those clubs committed financially, we haven't gone forward with anything with soccer. Is that to say that it couldn't happen in the future? No, but any use for soccer, committed use to soccer, would reduce the committed use to the one of or both of the other sports. And as I pointed out in my email to you, what that would eventually mean is the total amount of revenue the town collects from the organizations as a whole would probably stay the same. In other words, if lacrosse or football's time was reduced so soccer could get guaranteed time, their payments would shrink in relation to their time shrink. So,
Okay, would lacrosse with a new field, would they have less of a need for the others, for the artificial turf field, and then with their?
what they're looking to accomplish and what we're looking to accomplish with this additional project that's planned right now. Back when I came on board, we shrunk that project down by about $600,000. And part of that, the turf was basically 1 1/3. A third would have been unmarked, and it would have been used for practice and for small-sided games of lacrosse. Lacrosse always used that area for 3 small fields for their little kids. They have a lot of little kids. When it was shrunk, and we put the yellow lines in, it essentially gave them 2 fields, and they are short a third field. They've had to use school fields and other locations to make up for that. So for obvious efficiency purposes, they'd like to have everything at one location. So where there is, if you're on Church Street looking at it now, there's a grass field to the left. What we're looking to do is just basically extend that. Like I said earlier, there are some infrastructure improvements that we have to put in drainage, make sure the drainage is all tied into the project that was recently done. But just extend that by, I think it's about 15 yards in order for them, and then also put lights up so they could use it for, lacrosse could use for practice and for games for their smallest kids.
Okay, well, thanks, I really
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move into our official action meeting. So if everybody can rise for a moment of silence and then flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of
the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to reports from members of council. Mr. Newcomer.
Well, there is a lot. I was asked about the Hess Farm, and I wondered if there was any progress, and if this is the right, not the right time, as Stephanie told me. Was there any progress on the 2 ordinances that need to be done? And I know there's something with STEM going on recently, and this is why I asked as well.
In relation to the Hess Farm, be more specific.
So there is a portion of land around the Hess Farm which was going to be dedicated, as I understand it, to, or purchased by them, but part of the farmland preservation.
Well, yeah, because there's basically 2 things happening there. One is the farmland preservation, which I guess was approved 2 years ago. It's part of the county farmland preservation program. The second part of that is a conversation I've been having with Mr. and Mrs. Hess in relation to their desire to purchase some of the farm back from the township. And just for those that aren't aware, the Hess Farm has been in that family, for 100 and whatever years.
Mr. Hess is back
Oh,
here.
David, you might want to start making your way up to the microphone in case you want to answer any questions. In any case, back when the state, in their infinite wisdom, wanted to build a highway, basically between the creek and Lanola Road, right through the Hess Farm, they lost a number of acres. And ever since, there have been informal conversations with not just my predecessor, but his predecessor. Right, and I think now, and I've talked informally with some members of council, I think now is the time where we can move forward. And I've been working with Tom Ford, Mr. Dralis on preparing something for council, and basically where we are now is negotiating, well, I shouldn't say negotiating, that's a poor choice of words, is coming up with a number to present to council in terms of the purchase price per acre. There was an idea a couple of years ago that has since been dismissed about putting solar there. There really is no other potential use for the property. It's completely landlocked. There's no other way to get to it. So it's, I think, in the township's best interest to, not just from a revenue of selling the property, but to have, the Hess farm back in the hands of the Hesses. So, David, I don't know if you want to join the conversation and add anything, but we've started a discussion, so you might as well take the opportunity.
I've been ready for this discussion for years.
For a long time.
I don't know what part of the discussion we want to jump in on, but yes, our family has regretted the day that we lost the farm to the state for the building of Route 90.
Hey, can you just clarify how long ago that was?
That would have been the mid-60s. So we have a big folder at home that would show you the memos that we've been writing to the state and to the township for years and years, and we always are encouraged something positive is going to happen. We're more encouraged recently that it's getting close. So if we can finalize whatever the purchase price will be, get the ordinances done, we'd be thrilled. We understand that's a two-step process with the building the first reading, the second reading. Then we also understand that we need to be in a subdivision of the township property until it's finalized. So we're still months away, but we feel optimistic that we're getting there.
Yeah, like I said, Council, this it is a piece of property that is surrounded by the creek in the back and by the Hess farm on two of the other three sides, the third side being the township's sewer treatment plant. So there's no roads back there. There could never be any roads back there because of wetlands. There really is no other potential use that the township could have for this property since the solar project was dismissed, at least for that location.
I'll also add that part of our interest is not just to get back to the ground, but also the sensitivity of the ecosystem there due to the fact that that's basically wetlands. So the drainage from my farm is in jeopardy if they're not maintained the right way, and the rest of the farm is in jeopardy. So that's another big reason why we want to have the property back, protect the ecosystem of our farms. It's now preserved. It would be important to us to be able to preserve the ecosystem as well.
And I've talked with Mr. Hess about this issue as well, and I think it would be time to put it on a front burner item and get the heat on it a little bit, and move along with it. I think from 1960 to now is long enough. So thank you, Greg, for bringing it up, but I move along with that too.
All right, consensus on that?
Can we say that this would be on next agenda?
Well, yeah, where we are internally is I've asked Tom Ford to, he's done some work with EDAC over the years. He has talked with Dennis McClurk over the course of time, because this is obviously not a new issue, to provide me with a recommendation for a cost per acre. And once I get that from Mr. Ford, I will share it with council. Obviously, we're not going to negotiate with the Hesses in public, but I don't see this as being a difficult hurdle. I'm surprised it didn't happen 15 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, David, while you're there, David, I want to congratulate you, and I see Kathy Ward is back there, our co-chairs of the Sustainable Morristown. We are cresting on, thanks to the effort of David and the other committee members of Sustainable Morristown, 300 points. I think we need 350 points, and then we will be a silver, as I understand it, Silver Award winner for Sustainable Morristown. So what's that mean? David, what's that mean?
Well, the big thing is not just the recognition that the town really is an active town and does right things for sustainability for the green team. It also means that's an opportunity for the township to be far more eligible for a lot of grant money, larger dollars and more opportunities. So attaining the silver award will open the doors and make us eligible for many other grants that we currently are not eligible for. And because we are at that level, we will be seen in the pile as a good opportunity and low risk for somebody to give a grant to because of the success of our town. So we see that as an important hurdle.
Thank you, David. A few other items. I had brought up before the idea of having a town meeting which we discussed the value of the surplus. In my view, the surplus belongs to the residents that voted in the idea of having a revenue source for it. I would like council to discuss that, maybe in one of the next or following meetings, as to whether they think that's a good idea. I just bring that up tonight to ask that it be put on the agenda the next time or the time after.
I'm sorry, Greg, this is new to me. Could you clarify what?
We were the benefit of a surplus, much of which came from the fact that we voted in the town to have liquor licenses. That surplus, to me, was voted in by the residents and the taxpayers. So discussing the value of that surplus and things, as I brought up before, for instance, why would we not dedicate the surplus to such things? And maybe this is not the exact thing, but such things as having our own gas tank, or gasoline tank, at Public Works, rather than having our folks drive over to Mount Laurel, fill up their trucks and cars, and come back here. Things that are cost effective over the long term. Those are my ideas, but the people of the town may have other ideas, as they've had for many things that we've done, like this town hall.
I do think I understand what you're trying to say, and at the risk of getting into a debate about this now, I would be a little leery of the fact that we have someone that I think is the best municipal finance person in the state of New Jersey, who has, for the past 15, 16 years, managed the township's finances very well, including the surplus. To have that type of expertise, and then to take this surplus, which is a hugely valuable entity for this township in terms of keeping taxes down, put out there for just those that participate, because as you know, there's 20,000 people in this town, but 20,000 people are not going to participate in that process. It's a very small number, really. And this is council's call, but my 2 cents is, we have Mr. Michelle. He's had spot-on forecasts forever and a day. I would be very leery of taking the direction of our surplus away from him and putting it to people who might have, whatever their reasons may be, and they may be good, don't understand municipal finance the way he does.
Well, I was certainly not taking anything away from Mr. Michelle. That was not my goal. It was to get the valuable expertise of many people who have come to these meetings and talk to us. And I hope you didn't think that was my goal, to take anything away from Mr. Michelle. Whatever the council wishes to do, I'd just like to see if we would discuss it. But as I said, the next meeting or the following meeting, it's not a do it now job.
Personally, I would not be in favor of putting that on future agendas. I can tell you my answer now would be that we shouldn't be having a meeting like that. Of course, I agree with Scott that I trust Mr. Michelle's judgment, and as I said in the last meeting, to take a page out of your book, Craig, I'm going to reiterate something I said in the past, which is that, having that surplus, first of all, it's a windfall. We're never going to see that kind of money come into our township ever again. And that keeps our taxes low. It keeps our bond rating strong so that we can do the projects that you would like to see done, such as a gas tank, if that's what we wanted to do. We can do that at a lower rate so that it's less cost, it's more cost effective to us to do it over time. It is there in case we have an emergency, like, I don't know, town hall burns down. There's so many reasons why we want to preserve that. We have so many, I agree with you that our community has great ideas. We have many advisory committees that we rely on, but I don't think this is the type of financial decision where we want to solicit, a ton of opinions on how we can spend this money, because I think that we should be saving this money.
I think one of the things that you're asking for is to have this meetings that everyone can come in, but I think people are able to come now and give us those ideas. We just had Wolf and Chet come up and talk to us about things that they want to do at Strawbridge Lake, and I think those things are ideas that we can look at and to see where we want to put our resources. So I think that people do have that chance to come and they can come to our meetings and let us know the different ideas that they have, but to have a town hall meeting to kind of say, how should we spend this, I think would get a little out of hand. Silence? Okay. Did you have any more?
Well, I did, yeah, actually. And I'm kind of disappointed because actually when we built this town hall and this library, we had input from many, many people that helped us build it well. And I see that just as how we would do the surplus. But going forward then, I was wondering if there's any progress on the letter from the DEP we're going to send from this council in regards to Percheron Park and getting the DEP to move forward. I wonder if there's any information on it.
It's actually, it's not DEP, it's GES is the company doing the remediation for Puritan Oil. We have communicated back and forth, my office and them. The process of remediating contaminated soil is not something that can be pushed to move faster. I mean, it's a natural process that occurs as it occurs. And I have talked to some very valuable volunteers in town who have a area of expertise. In fact, I see Wolf still here. Wolf has a lot to offer on that. I was going to bring him in to talk to the Percheron Park people, as well as another person who he's not an official committee member, so I won't mention him by name, but he essentially has volunteered before and does this for a living. He's a LSRP himself. It's just a process that, as much as some people in this town want to see that park develop, it can only happen as fast as it's moving now. And when GES says they're done, believe me, Puritan Oil would love to get that property off their hands, the liability and everything that comes with it, and be done with it. It's just a process that has to play itself out.
I thought we were going to write a letter and we were going to put some force behind it in our last discussion about that. But if that's all there is, then that's all there is. In our vacant house discussions, which we had talked about different vacant houses, we had brought up the idea of, or maybe I had brought up the idea of a different code for the town, or there were other thoughts. I wondered if anything has moved forward on the vacant house discussion.
Chris Chiacchio was getting together a group of people, mayors and others throughout the county to have a roundtable discussion on what we can do moving forward. And I think Tony, you've been contacted about a couple things we can do. So,
well, yeah, they're like Stacy said, Chris was looking to get together with some of his colleagues in the county to brainstorm and see what can be done. It's a definite problem throughout this town, but as with most things, we're a lot better positioned than every other town in the area. During my research in this, I found out that Willingboro has literally hundreds and hundreds of abandoned homes. Where we have maybe a dozen, but that's still too many. Recently, Evesham Township passed an ordinance to deal with this. Tony and I have reviewed it, It was something that I was going to bring up later tonight, and Tony, if you want from a legally standpoint, would like to just tell council and the public a little bit about what this ordinance does,
Yeah, we can.
that would be great.
We can, we discussed it very briefly in a previous meeting where we were talking with some folks who had some concerns about vacant homes in the town. When a law had just been adopted in Trenton, signed into law by the governor, that gives municipalities the ability to fine monetarily banks, mortgage holders, out-of-town folks who were not paying attention to properties that are abandoned or derelict, the ability to fine them on a per-day basis up to $2,500, and to require that they disclose the identity of someone who would be a local contact for us to make sure that the property is maintained appropriately. Evesham has taken steps to implement the new state law, and we can do the same thing here, and we will.
How would that go forward?
Sorry.
How would that go forward?
We'll get an ordinance going.
Yeah, I read that statute that came in, and they did a very good job of defining what an abandoned property is. And I guess my question would be, could we take some of that same definition and apply it to privately owned properties or not? So in other words, they came up with criteria such as no drapes, not being mowed, no furniture, broken windows. In that bill, they list a whole bunch of criteria that defines an abandoned property. Could our ordinance inherit those same definitions with the same result?
Well, I think they would, and I think all of these private properties that we're talking about are privately owned. Well, yeah, and that's the struggle, is how far can you regulate private property without taking it or confiscating it? Because once you do, then you're into a whole nother monetary issue.
If it would be okay, could we move this discussion
Sure.
to later on in the meeting? This really is supposed to be a report of things that council members have done, and not asking about, things, agenda items, or wanting to see agenda items. That should be really on the workshop, and we do have it a part at the end of the meeting where we have a continuation of the workshop. So if we can move that to that discussion, that would be great. Greg, did you have any more?
I did actually, but I don't know if from what you just said.
Was it something, an event you attended? Is it a committee you were at?
No, I was told recently by the manager that I could bring up anything in this space or the end of the space, but that's okay.
Okay, well, yeah, because I think. Yes. All right, Mr. Garwood.
An event, October 5th. Step out with STEM at Lake Strawbridge Lake. I plan on attending that. I think it's a great event that everybody should attend. I hope to see everybody there. I've gone many years in the past, and it's fantastic. That's my report. Thank you.
I also have a brief report. Monday the 6th, following day, is the Lenola Fire Prevention Open House at the Lenola Volunteer Fire Company. It will be from 6 to 8 that evening. It's a lot of fun for kids to go out, see the fire trucks, learn a lot about fire safety, and I recommend you go check it out.
Thank you. Just to let people know, I was able to attend the Sean Fischel dedication at the library. If anybody was able to go to the library and see what a special place the Fischel Connect Foundation has given and donated to our library, it's really special. And what a nice event they had with tons of kids in there and fully dedicating that library space to Sean and his memory. I also wanted to bring up on Friday, I was part of a tree planting event that we had over, if anybody drives down Westfield Road by the school field, there are 10 brand new trees that we worked very hard to get a grant. And Mr. Gibson, if you can come up here, because I know I will forget to thank half the people, but there were many people involved in this effort. Beautiful day, it was great, and we had, 50, 60 volunteers out there?
We had about 50 volunteers show up. It was an event sponsored by, as I told council a while back, we were selected out of 10 townships to receive trees from the...
And they're not just the little trees.
Oh, no, these
were
are
500-600 pound
these are
trees that my muscles are still...
2.5 inch caliber trees were 15 to 20 feet tall, and I can personally assure each and every one of you that Deputy Mayor Jordan was
physically moving trees and digging holes the whole time. She didn't just make a cameo appearance, she was there the whole time. But we had about 50 volunteers at New Jersey Tree Federation and American Forestry, who partnered with IKEA. IKEA paid for the trees and sent about 15 volunteers to help plant. We also had volunteers from STEM, from Moorestown Public High School. We had the environmental club with students out there. We had probably about 15 students out there. We had the principal out the whole time. Mr. Seibel was out digging holes and working. He probably worked harder than Stacy because he had more muscles to dig the hole. We also had Moorestown, the tree planting, the tree committee was out there also. So we had a good time doing it.
Superintendent came out, Superintendent Tim Ream.
Yes, Superintendent Tim Ream was there, as was, we worked with Greg McCarty, who was the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and the most fantastic person to work with I've ever worked on an event with. I tell you, we started digging a sample hole before the volunteers got there, just so we could show them how to dig the hole, and the one guy from New Jersey Tree Foundation is using a pickaxe, and I said, "Are you doing that just because it's fast, or you need it?" He says, "You need it." And with that, Greg McCarty took out a cell phone, called Taylor Rental, and rented a mini backhoe so we could help expedite digging the hole. So it's very, and they're taking care of watering it. Brickman Group was very helpful in that also, and they're helping maintain the watering of the trees. So I would urge everyone to drive down Westfield Road. It really is. I was in awe.
It transformed the corner.
I was in awe. It was just a blank road, and now there's 10 big, beautiful trees.
Well, thank you, John, for all of your help, because without John's help getting that grant written in less than two and a half days, we wouldn't have had that opportunity, so thank you. And it was a wonderful day.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay.
One more report I'd just like to give, as I'm not a member of council, but I think we'd all be remiss, because you were there and you enjoyed it as well. The fundraiser at the library a couple weeks ago. Joe Galbraith, the library director, and his staff did a fantastic job, put together a night with author and TV personality Michael Smerconish, hosted by two Moorestown residents, Rick Williams from, I believe, Channel 6 News, and Sal Palantonio from ESPN. Joe told me that both Sal and Rick are always just willing to jump into anything for the township as long as their schedules allow it. And the library raised $5,000 that night.
Yeah, that was a great event. And if anybody does come by the library, it's very vibrant. There's lots of people in there. The day I was there with Sean Official dedication, I walked out into the main library, and all the computers were being used, and there was tons of people there. And it's very special to see that become such a community center for us. So kudos to Joe and his staff for doing a great job. And I had one more mention is EDAC is having their meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. In room A in the library. That will be tomorrow night. All right, any other? Okay, then let's move on. Move on to upcoming meetings. There will be one here October 6th at 7 p.m. for the workshop, 7:30 p.m. for official action, and also October 20th for 7 p.m. workshop and 7:30 p.m. official action right here, Municipal Complex, 111 West 2nd Street, Council Chambers. Anybody have agenda updates?
Just Mr. Taylor could not make it tonight. He was listed second under presentations and proclamations. And we'll try to get him to one of the next two meetings.
Okay. We need to adopt the consent agenda resolution. So may I have a motion to adopt the resolution approving the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Nays? Then we're going to move on to presentations and proclamations. We have an energy auditor presentation.
Madam Chairman, Ade Dosumu is from Efico Efficiency Company, and during the process of the design or the construction actually of the building, we were contacted by a number of companies that wanted to provide.
Heavy green taker.
That wanted to provide.
Anybody should know how the building works.
I trust you.
Bring it closer.
In any case, the Ade is here, and he has the first check to present to council, and I would invite him up to make his presentation.
Thank you.
So we do have a big check here. I don't know how that works. Let me speak to the mic.
You take it off.
Well, thank you so much. Actually, a Morristown resident myself. Yes, indeed. And really appreciate the opportunity to work with the township and the architect to provide energy efficiency rebates to Morristown. So we did come on the project towards the tail end, and we've been able to secure so far this amount of $10,000, which is just the first of many potential payments to the township for energy efficiency activities in the township's various areas.
We really appreciate this, and coming from a Morristown resident, what a great night for us, and continuing to make this happen with solar energy, with all the different energy efficiencies that we have in this new place in our new town hall, and that we're going to be doing throughout the town. So thank you very much for being here and presenting us with this.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we should point out that there's an additional grant or effort that Ade's using to go to PJM, so there may be a second effort. It's the real one. To the finance manager.
I was going to try to take the big check and fit it in the
How much the bank will cheap out. Thank you very much. Going to be moving on to ordinance on second reading. Mr. Manager, can you read them by title, please?
Certainly, we have two for this evening. First is 12-2014, authorizing the lease of a portion of Block 5800, Lot 46, Block 7200, Lot 1, and Block 7100, Lot 43, known as Better Open Space in Winter Fields, and all of Block 7401, Lot 3, the Nagel Tract, for the cultivation of crops.
Okay. I'd like to open this up to public hearing.
Good evening, Mark Hines, 138 Borough Road. Just a question about the process. I assume this is renewed every year? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a bidding process in this?
No, go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
It's the farms.
It's farms, yes.
Every 3 years. Yes, there's a process. It's going to be an auction. We'll advertise twice in the Burlington County Times. It's going to be probably mid-October, and it's a public auction.
Okay, thank you.
Just also add the council on the process of getting Green Acres to, part of the process is they have to approve our lease and everything, so I've been working with some of the different departments on that process, so wait for that before we go there.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'd like to see if we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay. Any discussion by council or motion to adopt ordinance 12-2014?
I did have one question. At one point, we discussed developing some sort of barrier for the insecticides or some sort of notification. Is that?
Yes, that's actually worked in the lease agreements. I did work with a pesticide person at DEP. Basically, there was never any storage of chemicals allowed on the property.
The chemicals themselves are approved, but they're not harmful, but what we're going to do is we're requiring notification, either some kind of posting or flags at all the parking areas and any of the entrances to any trails. That's going to be
Okay, and they're going to go to the full extent of the, like right up to the walkways, or they're going to, you know, I guess the barrier question is still there. Are they going to stop like 50 feet or?
That has not been discussed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Move ordinance 12.
Like I said, I think the reason it's not discussed is we just decided we're going to post it, notify people, rather than push back everything. We're just going to notify people that during the term, and each product has a specified term, whatever, and they have to abide by that term with how long the posting has to be.
That is going to be in the minutes. That's great. That's awesome. Thanks.
Move to approve ordinance 12-2014.
Second.
Yes.
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 Okay, next is ordinance 13-2014, and ordinance amending ordinance number 734, the Morgantown Township Salaries and Compensation Ordinance of 1973, as amended and supplemented by providing for salary and longevity for patrol officers, detectives, corporals, sergeants, and lieutenants.
I'd like to open this up for public hearing. Seeing none, we have a motion and second to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? So moved. Any discussion by council or a motion to adopt ordinance 13-2014 on second reading?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Mr. Newcomer?
Yes.
Mr. Garwood?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentino?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Fiore?
Yes. All right, moving on to ordinance for first reading.
We have one tonight, it's 14-2014, an ordinance amending chapter 6-45 of the Code of the Township of Morristown entitled Recreation Advisory Committee by increasing the number of additional student members to be appointed by 2.
Okay. Council, any discussion? Or can I have a motion to adopt on first reading and set the public hearing date for October 6, 2014 at 7:30 p.m.?
We met as a Recreation Advisory Committee as requested by the council and recommend this. We also met with Patty, who did a great job as usual putting this forward, and Teresa as well. Move to adopt 14/2014.
Second.
I already said it. Yeah. Adopt first hearing, public hearing date for October 6, 2014 at 7:30 p.m.
Mr. Newcomer?
Yes.
Mr. Garwood?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentino?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Fiore?
Yes. Moving on to consent agenda resolutions. Could you read all titles, Mr. Manager?
Yes. First is 179-2014, awarding a contract in the amount of $69,998 to Cherry Valley Tractor Sales for the purchase and delivery of a Kubota M8 560 HFC 85 horsepower cab tractor or equal. Next is 188-2014, authorizing a second and final one-year extension of a contract to EIC Inspection Agency Corporation for third-party inspection services. Next is 189-2014, authorizing the cancellation of certain water and sewer charges. 190-2014, authorizing the purchase of police vehicles under state contract. 191-2014, awarding a contract to Ocean Port Industries, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $154,000 for delivery and furnishing of sodium chloride for the Department of Public Works. 192-2014, awarding a contract for reconstruction of Spruce Avenue and Magnolia Court to Winsinger, Inc. in the amount of $343,639. 193-2014, accepting the resignation of William Barris III from the Economic Development Advisory Committee. 194-2014, authorizing signing of a 5-year contract with Morristown Fraternal Order Police Lodge 109. And 195-2014, authorizing signing of a 5-year contract with Morristown Supervisors Officers Association. Superior, Officers Association.
Excuse me. I would just like to note that Resolution 191, the title was changed to awarding a contract to Oceanport in the amount of $61.60 per ton, as opposed to the not to exceed number. So, prior to presentation to council, the resolution title was changed. It's the same difference, but we awarded for the ton, not for the other.
Mr. Mayor, let me just read. My apologies, Patty, you didn't provide me with this. 191-2014 would read as follows: awarding a contract to Oceanport Industries, Inc. in the amount of $61.60 per ton for delivery and furnishing of sodium chloride for the Department of Public Works.
And it was in the rest of our packets as well.
Yes. And considering that we have another winter like we did last year, a not to exceed number could come back to haunt us.
Okay. I'd like to open the floor to public comment.
MMA 209 Perry Drive. And the highlights of 194 and 195 are?
Mr. Burchell, do you want to take that one for me?
The increases are, it's a 5-year contract. It's 2%, 1.75, 1.75, 1.50, 1.50. There is a new position created called corporal, sometimes also known as lead officer, and it will be used to, it's a $3,000 a year stipend. 4 officers will be chosen, will be trained as superior for basically supervisors, and they will act in, basically we have a sergeant and 4, so if the sergeant calls out for any reason, the lead officer will be able to fill in his place, we would not have to call in a sergeant, so that would cut out some overtime. The longevity, there is no longevity for new hires going back to 2009, but they got a slight increase on the cap, not the percentage, but we always cap the amount, and it's capped through 2017, and then that's it. And then we have a new vacation schedule for new hires that we took away a lot of vacation time going forward. That will also help in long-term overtime, and then there was a lot of language cleanup because of Chapter 78 laws with healthcare contributions. So there's a lot of clarifying that, working that language in there, and the opt-out of healthcare. So we're very happy with the contract.
Maybe I missed it, you just talked about it, maybe I missed it. Are there any significant changes in the healthcare contribution and pension contribution?
Well, that's defined by, Mr. Burchell said, that's defined by Chapter 78. The state enacted that several years ago, and the FOP members of the town have not contributed that because anybody that was in a open collective bargaining agreement stayed out of that contribution level until their contracts ran out. So beginning with the enaction of this, or the council passing this contract and being signed by the FOP, they will begin contributing per the Chapter 78 contribution levels, which after 4 years, once they go all the way through the 4-year phase out, they'll be contributing roughly 35%.
35%.
But
on the premium. 35% of the premium.
That's the health insurance.
Well, correct. And there is one additional thing that we negotiated was the HMO is the base plan for any new hires. And if they want an additional plan, say they want the PPO, they have to pay 100% of the cost differential on top of the Chapter 78 cost.
And the pension contribution?
We don't control that. That is the state controls our pension, and everyone's pensions have been increasing. I think they're at 10.5% of their salary for the pension increase.
Thank you.
And just in case there's any confusion about the new position of corporal, what we tried to accomplish there is Morristown for forever has run a platoon shift patrol of 5 officers, 1 sergeant and 4 patrol officers. And when the sergeant was out, whether it was sick, vacation, whatever the reason may be, even though they will run with a minimum of 4 officers per shift, in other words, 4 is still an acceptable number in terms of officers per shift, they haven't had this, and pretty much every other town has a lead officer situation in their police ranks. It's just caused a huge amount of overtime because sergeants typically have been with the township for a long time, typically have lots of vacation and sick time built up. If they take that time off, sergeants or lieutenants are coming in, do the overtime. Obviously, they're the higher paid officers, and it's cost the town a lot of money. So it's 4 platoons. It's going to cost, or excuse me, 5 platoons. It's going to cost $15,000 and then $3,000 per corporal, and we'll save lots of money again.
Okay, any other public comment? All right, seeing none. Council, any comment or motion to adopt?
Go ahead. 2 comments. First off, thank you, Scott, for all your information on Kenny Ure's information in regards to the $69,998 Cherry Valley tractor sales. I need to separate my vote. I will vote no to that. I do believe that we could find a way with the Board of Education, who does similar things with that tractor that we do, to have some type of shared service agreement. It was reported in the minutes that I was saying there was another town who would do that. I meant it to be the Board of Education because we do similar things with that tractor. Certainly, there's a lot of opportunities for shared services, and I'll certainly get into them later. Also, I was curious on the water and sewer charges. It seems it says that we charge the First Presbyterian Church, if I understand it, $3,212 and $1,836 since 2007, a duplication of that amount?
I believe what happened was there was a new water meter placed in, and the old water meter was not removed. I could find out before, but there was something with duplication. We had to go back and reimburse them.
And we have done that?
That's what this is doing right now.
We will do that by doing this.
Correct.
And is there any other way to discover through records or anything that where we might have a double water meter anywhere else? By the age of the meter, for any record we have in regards to that? Or?
Well, I mean, this shouldn't happen to begin with, but because
I don't think it should happen. I'm just saying.
Well, I agree, but because we're still on a manual reading system, antiquated, there's no electronic way to read these. You're sending out meter readers, to bring his attention, and I'll have to find out exactly how this fell through the cracks, but I believe it was a change out of a water meter, and somebody didn't remove the old meter off the records.
Is there a certain age of a meter that would, be an indication of where we might do this somewhere else? I mean, is there another church in town, for instance, or somewhere buildings that are older have meters, or don't you know?
Yeah, I would know that.
Tom, did they pay twice? Is that what happened?
No, I believe it was an overbilling.
Oh, okay.
Any other comments? I just wanted to thank Tom and Scott for your hard work during the contract negotiations. I know it's tough, and I think you did an admirable job, and we thank you for keeping the township's best interest at heart, so thank you. Okay. And we don't need a motion to adopt. Well, we already have the motion to adopt the consent agenda. Just to separate? Oh, that's right, Greg, I'm sorry.
Well, you can just call for the vote, and I'll say that.
Okay, perfect.
Correct.
So we do need a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Mr. Newcomer?
Yes, no on 179-2014, yes on the rest of the consent agenda.
Mr. Garwood?
Yes.
Mr. Napolitano?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jordan?
Yes. Okay, minutes. Moving on to minutes of September 8th, 2014, official action. Council comments or motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. Newcomer?
Yes.
Mr. Garwood?
Abstain.
Mr. Palladino?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jordan?
Yes, abstain. That was the day my daughter had surgery.
Did that pass?
Two, yeah.
Time to review the people, but on the minutes though.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. This is the minutes. Okay. All right, all right, moving on to approval of expenditures, which we have none. So now we can continue the workshop. Mr. Newcomer, did you want to bring?
Yeah, I have a few other things.
Great.
I talked to Scott before about the possibility of particularly two residences, and there was one that actually this happened with on 2nd Street, whom I know people who are handicapped. One woman actually has kind of aluminum ankles. She would have no way of moving out from her residence if she wanted to move down the block, except in a wheelchair. And these are two residences that I know of. I wonder if there was a way to move forward a set of ramps to these locations, and we have talked about this before.
When you say ramps, you're talking about the curb cuts?
Correct.
Yeah, I think probably best that would be for you, if council is okay with it, you and I sit down with Mr. Rudman, discuss that.
I'll be happy to. Thank you. Also, on July of 2013, I gave the council an executive summary in regards to the joint insurance fund, and I brought this up about 8 times after that in regards to those things that I gleaned from the seminar in regards to that, that were of value, and we were going to discuss it in a meeting or a closed meeting, and I wondered if it could be substantially put on the agenda at some point so we can do this.
Yeah, and I apologize, but we have discussed this before. It's been a little while, but we have, and you know, the roadblock, I guess, that we hit was twofold. One, correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of the discussion would be about security of public meetings, which I don't know that you know, that we'd want to have a discussion like that in public. I think it's, you know, in private with our police professionals and our safety coordinator from our GIF, but that would be a call I would leave to Mr. Dralas and Ms. Hunt in terms of our ability to do that. The second part would be beyond council. I think at the very least we would need to include the zoning and planning board. Then it's just becoming a coordination dilemma of getting council and the two boards together in a meeting that may or may not be closed. And I guess it's just a matter of figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, another part of that summary, I believe, was related to how we treat the sports groups that are under the recreation in regards to various physical issues that they have. But I think they're both an executive summary. Maybe it could be recirculated.
Sure, and then well, we can just give it to Mr. Johnson. We can discuss it. Let us know if this could be open or closed. We'll do it.
I have, for several of the last few meetings, brought up an ordinance tracking sheet, and I'll give the illustration again. You have the ordinance number, you have a short description such as a drainage, or actually there were 4 things. In a recent council meeting, one was a value of 1.7 million, one was another value of 300,000. Tracking the value that will be the third block of the spreadsheet. Whether it was done with engineering would be the 4th column of the 3rd sheet. Whether it was 25%, 50%, 75% completed, and then finally a comments column. This would be a tracking value for us I get questions myself about what we are doing in various things in town. It probably would be a little difficult in the beginning to do, but it wouldn't be that hard, I don't think, to keep up afterwards. And I have, in my corporate life, kept up such a spreadsheet. I think I have brought this up 4 times now. I wondered if by any chance this would be able to be moved forward.
I think that's a good idea, it would be useful. At the very least, we can start doing that with new projects going forward.
I'd like to see it as well.
Consensus of the council.
I'm not going to use the word CMMS, but I did forward to the council a cyclical maintenance example of what is done with several buildings, and I wonder if we could discuss this the next time. An asset management an asset management program of how we're going to keep the windows clean, keep this new building painted up, but for all our buildings in the town. If we could discuss that next time, if not a CMS, another program. The one I sent forward was a program for the upkeep of a building in Pomona, New Jersey, and I'll be happy to recirculate that too. I think it's important that we look at how we're going to keep our assets up. So I'll just ask if I could recirculate that, and we could discuss it maybe in the 3rd or 4th meeting. We have a lot of things we're discussing, but if we could discuss it in the 3rd or 4th meeting. The second to last thing I'll say is I think it's a great idea that we recognize Barbara Rich, and I wondered how we would make a proclamation for, if this is possible to make a proclamation for doing so at the next meeting, as her timing is short here in New Jersey.
No, I agree. And if there's something we can get together and have for the next meeting, I think all of us in council, she's a true gem in Morristown, so we need to recognize all the work and everything she's done for us.
And finally, I just wanted to say that I was lucky enough to celebrate my 36th wedding anniversary last week, and my wife just stepped out. She was here before, but I was like...
You're getting brownie points for that one, Greg. Sorry.
Make sure it's in the minute.
You got that down, right? All right.
So thank you. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Craig. Mr. Barber? Do you have anything to ask the work session?
Nope, I'm good.
The only thing I'd say is that maybe if any one of us has something we really want to discuss at the meeting, we should bring that up in advance and get it on the agenda, so that all of us can be prepared to have a substantive discussion about it. So we just bring it up on the spot, maybe we don't have all the information we would have otherwise wanted to have to actually be able to talk about it.
All right. Then we're going to now move on to comments from the public on items listed on the agenda.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Edward Bed, 209 Parry. 4 items. First of all, I think we should give recognition to 2 groups. The current members of council and members of prior council, one group. And the second group is Mr. Reagan and his talented designers, on which we were able to get a $10,000 check. My only question is to Mr. Rochelle, can we cash that big thing, or do you have to have a small piece of paper?
He got the little one.
We'll make it happen.
I got a deposit slip that size.
Number 2, the lake, Strawbridge Lake. As a community, we're going to have to decide, I think, between a lake that's eyeball pretty but biologically dead, and something maybe you have to peek over to look at, but biologically healthy. And one thing that was talked about was a chemical treatment to neutralize the effects of phosphorus. I don't know what the chemical is, but it doesn't matter. I think as a community, there should never be an exception to the rule of custodianship, that we always, with the body of water going through our community, it never gets worse. Working further along the lake and the problems, I hope there are a minimum of at least 3 measurement sites, physical sites. Maybe a first site upstream, going downstream, maybe a 1/10 of a mile south of Route 38, where it starts at the border of Mount Laurel. Second point would be where Pennsauken Creek enters into Strawbridge Lake. And the third is some point upstream from the Moorestown sewage treatment plant. Because I'd like to find out, it's one thing to measure things, and no mention of whether it was increasing, decreasing, or where these measurements were taken. But part of the science is always the numbers and the ability to do something with numbers. So at a minimum, I'd like to know, or I think we should know, what load the community itself is adding to the lake. Hence, the start of the system at the border, south of Route 38, then Pennsauken Creek, and then just above, somewhere above our sewage treatment plant. So that applies not only to phosphorus, which was mentioned as a problem, but also silt, which is one of the other problems. Recently, my wife and I surveyed, went physically down the lake, and the township, in my view, should be commended that on both sides of the lake, as far as we could see from upstream to mostly downstream and ending, say, in our case at Kings Highway, that there was a strip of vegetation on both sides of the lake, which would have an beneficial effect of filtering out silt runoff, in a heavy rainstorm, and noticing, at least on the residential side of the lake, everybody had a lawn, and every lawn that I could tell looked pretty green. So in part, maybe we are creating our own problem. The next item, surplus. I know last time I asked for a number, well, what is it? And I have the highest regard for Mr. Rochelle, and I could understand where dollar bills are fungible, and there would have to be some judgment and estimation at times. But I submit, if we don't know, we do not, again, dealing with numbers, if you're dealing with finance, you can't help it. Boy, working with numbers. If we don't have a number for surplus, I submit the most fiscally and financially conservative position is there is no surplus.
But Mr. Vega, I think the discussion at the last meeting, if I remember correctly, was not that we didn't have a number for surplus, but what we don't have a number for is how much of that surplus is made up of money from selling liquor licenses. I think that's what the point that Mr. Rochelle and I were trying to make.
Well, that was the surplus. My understanding was...
It's not the only thing that makes up the surplus.
Give me a number, I don't care, liquor license and another source or other sources, give me a number of them.
I think Mr. Rochelle could give us a pretty accurate number where our surplus is right now.
Well, so it's probably about 6.5 million right now, but if you want to stop by the office, I'll give you the last 15, 16 years, of numbers on the surplus. Like that.
I said I have the highest. So right now, our surplus is 6.5 million.
6.5.
Estimated. I appreciate its estimate. One last thing. I think council suggests the council look at this as a business, very substantial business. We have a running rate of money flowing through the coffers on an annual basis. The council budget or the township government budget, 23 million plus, and the income and flow through on the utility bill, sewer and water is another 8 million. So 31 or a $32 million budget. That's a pretty substantial business. Now, I don't know, municipal accounting, there are some challenges, some talents, some numbers that have to be thought about, but I don't know what our assets are, but I'm sure it's a multi-million-dollar asset. In fact, nothing else. Right here, we're, what, $11 million. So getting to Mr. Newcomer's point over and over and over, I don't think his suggestion, maybe some other way to do it, but we are a substantial business. We run through a lot of money, we have a lot of assets, like I'm sure the police department has, what, 20, 30 vehicles. The Department of Public Works has a couple dozen probably or so. So we have to consider seriously doing something about managing our assets. That's all I've got to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Beck.
Beck.
Okay. Any other
I'm at 123 Augusta Drive. 7 months ago, I put in an Oprah request, or last month I should say, for the solar engineer, and Patty was kind enough to supply me a lot of documentation that was provided. And one of the concerning things I saw on it was that the township manager made a recommendation for 3 engineers that he thought were qualified, but then out of nowhere, there were email chains from members of council supporting somebody that Mr. Droll was supported, as opposed to what the township manager supported. I was wondering why you would make decisions like that via email chains instead of out in public.
I don't know, the decision was made that way. Was the decision made to run the email chain?
To add the solar engineer that was selected without a resume, it was made via the email chain.
That's not how I recall the process occurring. I did bring up 3 names, correct. I was supplied by Mazer their resume, list of references, did provide that to council before they made their decision. I can't speak for council, but it's been a while since, and I get about 150 emails a day, but I believe there was, the emails I received, if I remember correctly, was that they were satisfied, members of council were satisfied with Mazer based on, I guess, what I provided them and what they had heard themselves. But once again, I don't want to speak for you guys if you guys want to.
I think there was talk from Chris, if I can remember correctly.
I wouldn't even try to guess.
Why, I didn't think
No, you have to have the documents.
You forwarded the documents to council, so the open request, you told me the policy was you forward all the requests
I did.
to council along with the response. So the
And
council,
you're asking them to remember something a month ago, what is written.
this email was only written a couple weeks ago when you responded to the request.
No one made.
But anyway, I can forward the
Mr.
email.
Gorman, I did respond.
Once I get this list.
That's correct.
That's what happened. There's no decisions by email.
There was a decision by email. I can forward the email chain back to you.
Anything else?
She have a copy on it.
Anything else?
Yes, I would like to hear why members of council appointed somebody without a resume based on the advice of Mr. Drawless, who came from the, recommended somebody from the county, which he also has other positions in. And as we know, last year.
No,
it's a conspiracy theory, Bob, it just has no legs. It doesn't exist, it didn't happen.
Mr. Drawless, you always mention about the conspiracy theory to shut things down.
You
As opposed to copying the email chain, Mr. Carew recommended 3 members.
Mr. Gorman, there was a resume. I don't know where you're getting.
Not initially.
I don't know where you're getting, it's not a resume.
If I remember correctly, I believe the first time Mazer was discussed was during the conversation when Kathy Ward gave her presentation.
Thank you. I was just going to say that. There was.
That was the
Kathy
first
Ward-
meeting in July.
Kathy Ward from Sustainable Morristown talked about it, and she mentioned Mazer, which I think, well, I can't speak for Chris, but we collectively as members went and did research. And we found out, at least I found out, Mazer did a public project using brownfields. And that was the direction we were trying to go in. And I thought that would be something that would be suitable to use an engineer, a firm that actually did a project of the magnitude and the scope that we wanted to do, instead of using a firm that's never done that before. That's just my personal opinion.
The email chain clearly shows that the township manager recommended 3 firms, and then based on the advice of the township solicitor.
Each recommends as many
added
people
If
as
I
he wants.
may, I would like to speak as a member of council. Mr. Gorman, I did recommend T&M Associates and Pannoni, which I did know had a great deal of experience actually in solar division. And I authored an email on July 18th, which I sent to the council in regards to that. I also spoke in that email and spoke at the council and said that we should examine the scope of work. And that historically is what my ability, and I did send emails in regards to that. I don't know of any other emails that were, but I did send emails in regards to that, and I know we did discuss it. And the scope of work also was in regards to how much money we would have to pay Mr. Mazer. Now, subsequent to that, I have read something else, but that's not germane to your question.
Has there been a scope of work determined yet?
No.
Mr. Gorman, I'd just like to add, at any point in those conversations that you read, did 3 members of this council in one email make a decision? Because that would have been a violation of OPRA.
Yes, they did, actually. And
On the same chain to each other, because.
Yes, they did. To answer your question, yes, they did. The
Not
chain
anything I said.
clearly directed Mr. Carew to place on the agenda that night the appointment. Yes, and the email's public. I mean, I can email it back to you so you don't read it.
Please do, because I think you're incorrect. Also, we're entitled, and it's appropriate for council to do research and come to conclusions before we come here. We are not supposed to come here completely uninformed about what we're going to be speaking about. So unless you want to sit here and watch us read resumes for hours, there's no other way that we can conduct business other than to do our research before we come to a meeting.
And if those resumes were distributed to members of council, they could have made an educated decision.
And they
However,
were.
those resumes were not distributed. Mr. Newcomer clearly stated that meeting he never heard of saw the resume from that company. Is that correct, Mr. Newcomer?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Personally, I trust our Sustainable Morristown people, and that's the recommendations that I heavily rely on.
I believe, if I could, I believe the Sustainable Morristown people, if you will, Kathy Ward recommended the actual pulverizer field as a possible site, and that was the portion that she recommended. I don't remember her recommending any specific contractor. I also, you know, as we're thinking about this, would like to reiterate that I have a great concern as you, just for solar in general, and I think it's very important that we move forward well with the solar. And the last time we went through this, I think I did bring this up in the memo, we talked about the the sewer plant was brought up tonight, we first established how much electric energy we're saving, which is very important, and which Mr. Michelle and PSEG could say, what's the kilowatt hour value? I think that was either in the email or, and my memory is not serving me well, correctly, just right, but I know that's something I'm very, very interested in, that we establish.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Mr. Gorman, just for future reference, you have to keep it to items that are on the agenda. That was not on the agenda. You can bring that up at a different time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Just a point of reference, though. You read the agenda had an item on it for requesting residents' presentation for things that are on the agenda, and you skipped that portion.
No, we didn't.
No,
we didn't.
You did.
Yeah, we received a check.
You said you were going back to the workshop where there was a section for that you didn't come back to.
Oh, no, we did. Yes, you did. You missed it. You weren't here.
No, I was here.
No, you weren't. You were out of the room.
Thank you.
We had a present. Did you not see the check presentation for $10,000?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. Jack Lance, 302 East Main Street. Real quick, just quick question, the Scott Taylor, Jeff Young hockey rink, is that presentation not taking place tonight, but will in the future?
Yeah, it didn't because Mr. Taylor had a sick child.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I was curious, I was interested to hear about that. Just on the Jeff Young field itself, I don't know, Scott, if you were notified or anybody's notified, I assume, is it the rec department or would it be the DPW that handles the maintenance?
Yeah, Mr. Babcock alerted me to, right, if you're talking about the problem with the playground.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately Public Works, but situations like that, I left both Ms. Miller and Mr. Lewis. But yeah, Public Works is going to, if they haven't already, made that repair.
Okay. Can I show you this? Oh,
sure.
Just share with council, actually. They're just photos of the park. And I was there for soccer games over the weekend, and there's a little string of caution tape for the steps going up. Of course, kids, they go right through that. And I know the parents, parents are all watching their children, but the children get involved, they start playing, and the problem is that the plastic is actually breaking apart. So I don't know, I'd even be willing to volunteer some of my time to either help repair it, or even possibly just put some kind of caution around it, maybe a fence temporary, something to stop the kids, more of an obstacle for them to get into there, just because I feel like it is a hazard. And a couple of the other photos were just of the park at Strawbridge Lake. It looks a little...
This is Strawbridge Lake and...
Some are Strawbridge Lake, and some are there, and it just looks run down. Almost, there's swings missing, chains broken. And just curious, maybe if we have a scheduled maintenance if we go through the parks, I don't know, I haven't found anything yet.
Yeah, the stuff like that would be items that Mrs. Miller would present in her budget request. Maintenance would be done through her operating budget. And then each department head, each director provides me also with not only their individual budget requests for their operating budget, but also a capital budget request. That would come from Mrs. Miller, something like replacing a top lot. That's not something we would pay for out of our operating budget. I don't know, and we have one current who also was a former member of RAC and a former chairman of RAC. If you guys could speak to how, because I know that the Recreation Advisory Committee also involves itself with Mrs. Miller's.
Right.
What we used to do would be just an annual, everybody would get together and say, all right, we're going to go hit this park, just everybody as a group going toward the parks. And, it would be once a year in the spring, drive around. It was a fun night. We go take a look at the park, say, well, this looks like it needs a little work, and sort of help, get some more eyes on it. I think that may have been a good thing to keep rolling with. I guess you guys would be doing that.
Well, actually, the pictures look like possibly vandalism because it sort of swings down, it looks like.
Yeah, the kids are rough on stuff.
Yeah, and so I don't know if a once-a-year issue is more than kind of keeping up with the inspection. And I guess, is it recreation, or would it be, Scott, would it be recreation, or would it be Public Works that would review regularly if there was vandalism? Because this looks like vandalism to me.
Public Works usually does the work, but this is really would fall under recreation, both the planning aspect, especially the planning aspect, but also keeping track of problems in the park. And the one thing I do want to point out, we always talk about at these meetings, and we always see throughout town the great volunteerism that exists. And we've talked about that a lot today. We've had a couple chairmen from advisory committees, and I appreciate the offer to help. And I just have to point out, because we've talked about having volunteers do other infrastructure improvements. Our insurance company is very specific on how we put these things together. Playgrounds, believe it or not, have certified installers. God forbid we did something without a certified installer and a kid got hurt, there would be a huge liability situation. Mr. Taylor and I have discussed ways to work around that for volunteer projects. Like we've talked about possibly the hockey rink being a project where volunteers help chip in, and we'll have to talk to Mr. Joss about this before we get there, but having a certified installer from a company that installs equipment there overseeing the volunteers may be enough. That's enough to, well, overcome that liability.
So far,
Right. But I do appreciate the offer.
No, I noted it's been some time, and I just want to make sure it's addressed before. I understand the concerns there, but also at the same time, we have some damages that maybe someone could even get hurt on in the meantime. So that's all.
Thank you for bringing us up.
I
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments?
Madam Deputy Mayor, I just want to address the medallion issue at some point. I don't know if it's appropriate at this time of the agenda, but I am very upset that you all would have anything leveled at you that's clearly my responsibility and my concern. So if you let me address it now, I will. If you let me wait, I can.
I think. Are you okay with that?
I'm very upset, of course, that the medallions have something that Google says is something different than we thought it was. The Latin phrase, "we confirm all things twice," was resulted from one of our staff going to a Latin dictionary and picking out words that we were convinced said what I just said, "we confirm all things twice." We've looked at the definition of the words, and it says that the verb or Dutch languages, but Google's version, and I am old enough to admit that I have never translated anything on Google. And
Conjugated.
Or conjugated anything on Google. But their version is we all second guess. And so that I cannot have that confirmation that that's what that would say, because everyone's just going to go to Google and they're not going to go to the dictionary. So I think that we have, I want to reiterate the fact that council had no involvement in that decision. That decision was something we selected internally, and if anyone asked me what it meant, as I'm sure Scott did, it was, we confirm all things twice. So why would you even object to that? The second medallion has Friends of the Library. That's pretty simple, and we had the correct date on our drawings, but when the shop drawing came in, they left out a couple C's, which changed the date. We had 10,000 decisions happening in this building. That's unfortunately not something that I attended to closely enough. And for that, I apologize to you, and I apologize to you, our residents. I have suggested a number of items that would correct that situation by correcting a few letters. One is nos secundus omnia concur, which means Google's meeting, we do everything together, or nos secundus omnia confirmo, and when you say confirmo would translate to confirm? No, it's we do encourage everyone. So if it's okay with you, I would like to change the letters to we do encourage everyone and use Windows Omnia Confirmo.
Can anybody check Google for us?
Trust me, I've checked Google.
I can
Confirm that twice, right?
Please.
No, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention.
He asked a question. We're very-
Oh, yeah, I think we're okay with that, right?
We're good with it. We encourage everyone and our architects.
I'll put for my son the Latin language that he's studying now, make sure it's okay with him.
You better tell him to go to Google.
No Google. All right, we do not have any closed session necessary tonight. I know, disappointing. So we will, I will ask for closing comments by council. Mr. Newcomer.
Yes, as inappropriate in timing, I did forget one thing, so I will ask if at the next meeting, we could get an update on the Morristown Field track as a resident approached me and said a regularly jogging rut that goes around the track, and when it's wet, it has a lot of junk in it. And I said, I know we are moving forward with that, but would like an update.
Why don't we do this, and because Mr. Taylor's gonna come back.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Meeting, whether it's the next meeting or the meeting after, when he's here, we can address that question.
Right. And thank you all for coming tonight and sticking it out.
Thank you very much. I know it was a long meeting, longer than expected. Thank you for coming, and have a good night.
Just a few quick items. I want to thank Tom for the ordinance 12 for the leasing of the farmland. Really addressed a lot of concerns that were brought up by Open Space Committee earlier this year, so I really appreciate your work on that. And also to Tom and Scott for your contract negotiations with our police department. Guys did an excellent job. No, excuse me. One other thing I forgot to mention in my opening comments was that, as I had mentioned previously, we have been giving grant writing services through the Berlin County Bridge Commission, and we have identified a couple of grants that we'd like to apply to for next year, so we're trying to set up a meeting with the grant writer now so that we can get on applying for those for next year. And other than that, thank you all for coming.
Thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate you being here, and do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.